The Rules of Apartment 3. The listing looked too good to be true. A one-bedroom apartment downtown for $450 a month. Daniel Reed read it 3 times, convinced it had to be a typo. Apartments in this part of the city never went for less than $1,200, even the tiny ones with peeling paint and broken heating. But this listing showed bright photos, high ceilings, hardwood floors, large windows, and the description was short and oddly confident. Quiet building, no pets. Must follow house rules. That last line made him pause, but not for long. He had been crashing on friends' couches and renting spare rooms for 6 months since moving to the city. His job as a software developer paid decently, but deposits, fees, and skyrocketing rent kept pushing him further from anything comfortable. The idea of walking to work instead of spending an hour on the subway felt almost unreal. He messaged the number. The reply came immediately. You can view it today. 6 p.m. The building stood on a narrow street between a closed pharmacy and a laundromat. It was older than everything around it. Dark brick, tall windows, a heavy wooden entrance door with frosted glass. A man was already waiting outside. He looked to be in his 60s, wearing a faded blazer over a button-up shirt. Thin gray hair combed back. His skin had a waxy, unhealthy tone, and his eyes seemed slightly sunken, as if he hadn't slept well in years. "Daniel?" he asked. "Yeah, Arthur Coleman." He extended his hand. Daniel shook it and immediately noticed how cold it was. "Let me show you the place." The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and old varnish. Their footsteps echoed as they climbed. The lights flickered slightly, not enough to be alarming, but enough to feel intentional, like the building was aware of them. 3rd floor. Arthur unlocked apartment 3B. The key turned slowly, metal scraping metal. The door opened with a long, quiet creak. The apartment was larger than Daniel expected. High ceilings, crown molding, old hardwood floors with scratches worn smooth by time. The furniture looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades, but it was clean and solid. There was also a smell, mothballs, definitely, and something else, sweet, faint, almost like burnt sugar. Daniel walked through the rooms, living room, bedroom, kitchen. He stopped at a door to the right of the entrance. It was locked. "What's in there?" he asked. Arthur didn't answer immediately. "Storage," he said finally. Daniel nodded, though the answer sounded rehearsed. "So, why is it so cheap?" he asked. Arthur shifted his weight, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "There are rules," he said. Daniel smiled slightly. "Rules? Read them first." He unfolded the paper. "Apartment rules. Do not turn on the hallway light after 11 p.m. Do not open the room to the right of the entrance. If you hear footsteps at night, do not leave the bedroom. Every Saturday, leave a glass of water on the living room windowsill. Do not look out the kitchen window after midnight. If the phone rings at 3:33 a.m., do not answer. Do not ask about previous tenants. If the locked room door is open, leave immediately and call me on the last day of each month. Turn off all lights at midnight for 5 minutes." Daniel let out a short laugh. "This some kind of gimmick?" Arthur didn't smile. "It's important." "Why?" Arthur hesitated. "The apartment has a history." "That doesn't really explain." "Follow the rules," Arthur said quietly, "or don't take the apartment." Daniel looked around again. Downtown. Spacious. Cheap. "I'll take it," he said. Arthur nodded as if expecting that answer. Daniel moved in the next day. He brought only essentials: laptop, clothes, a few books, coffee maker. The apartment felt too large for one person, and the silence inside it seemed thicker than normal silence. the kind that pressed gently against the ears. For the first 3 days, nothing unusual happened. He worked from the living room table, ordered takeout, unpacked slowly. The sheet with the rules stayed on the counter, gradually getting buried under receipts and empty coffee cups. By Saturday, he had completely forgotten about it. That night, he woke up thirsty. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m. He shuffled to the kitchen, half asleep, and flipped the switch. The light flickered once, twice, then went out. "Great," he muttered. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across the sink, the cabinets, and stopped. A hand was pressed against the inside of the kitchen window. Daniel froze. The fingers were long, pale, slightly bent, as if someone was leaning their full weight against the glass. He stepped closer. The 3rd floor. No fire escape, no balcony, nothing outside except empty darkness and distant streetlights. The hand didn't move. "Hello?" he whispered. No response. He raised his phone closer. The skin looked almost translucent. Then, slowly, the hand slid downward, leaving no mark, and disappeared below the frame. The air in the kitchen turned suddenly cold, breath visible in front of his face. His mind jumped to the rules. Water. Saturday. He filled a glass with shaking hands and placed it on the windowsill. The cold vanished instantly. The overhead light flickered back on. Daniel stayed there until morning. By dawn, the water in the glass had turned black, as if ink had been poured into it. He called Arthur immediately. "You forgot the water," the old man said, not sounding surprised. "What the hell was that?" "The apartment," Arthur replied. "It gets thirsty." "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Daniel rubbed his face. "This is insane." "Then you can leave. I'll return the money." Daniel looked around. The sunlight made everything appear normal again. He sighed. "I'll stay, but I'm following the rules." "Good," Arthur said. "That's safest." That night at exactly 2 a.m., Daniel heard footsteps, slow, soft, from the front door to the locked room, then back again. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. The steps stopped outside his bedroom door. Silence, then breathing, slow, raspy, as if someone stood inches away. Daniel pulled the blanket up to his chin. After a long pause, the breathing stopped. A child giggled softly. Then the footsteps ran away. Lighter now, quick, playful. Daniel didn't sleep again. The footsteps returned every night, always at 2. Sometimes they dragged. Sometimes they shuffled. Once, they stopped right outside the locked room, and Daniel heard something like fingernails scratching wood. He tried recording it on his phone. The playback contained only static. 3 nights later, the landline rang. Daniel hadn't even noticed it before. An old beige phone sitting on a small table. 3:33 a.m. The ring echoed loudly in the silent apartment. He stared at it. The rules: do not answer. The ringing continued, long, patient. On the 10th ring, he picked it up. "Hello?" Static. Then a woman's voice, distorted. "Help me." Daniel's stomach tightened. "I'm burning. I can't leave. He won't let me leave." The voice turned into a scream. The smell of smoke filled the room. Daniel dropped the receiver. It kept ringing anyway. He pulled the cord from the wall. Silence. But the faint smell of burnt plastic lingered. In the morning, Arthur was already at the door. "You answered," he said. "How do you know?" "The apartment tells me." Arthur looked toward the locked room. "Now she knows you can hear her." Daniel felt a chill. "What does that mean?" "She'll try to come through you?" Over the next few days, the apartment changed. Condensation formed on the walls. The temperature swung wildly. The smell of smoke appeared at random, and the locked door began to open, just slightly at first. Crack. Daniel closed it, locked it again. The next morning, open. Arthur replaced the lock. Next day, open again. It's getting stronger, Arthur said quietly. What do I do? The old man handed him a small bag of salt and an old iron key. One way to end it. Daniel stared at him. You want me to go in there? Arthur nodded. Tonight, last day of the month. Turn off all lights, then go inside. There's a burned spot in the floor. Pour the salt. Say a prayer. And if I don't? Arthur met his eyes. Then it comes out. The last day of the month arrived quietly. Daniel spent the evening pacing the apartment. The key lay on the table beside the bag of salt. Every few minutes he glanced at the locked door. It looked ordinary. Cheap paint, brass knob, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something on the other side was waiting. At 11:59 p.m., he stood in the living room. Midnight. He turned off the lights. Darkness swallowed the apartment instantly. For a second, nothing happened. Then the sound began. Footsteps. Not one pair. Many. Soft, heavy, dragging, running. They echoed from every direction at once, as if dozens of people were moving through the rooms. Whispers followed, overlapping, impossible to understand. Somewhere, a child laughed. The locked door creaked. Daniel tightened his grip on the key and stepped into the hallway. The air pouring from the partially open door felt icy and carried the unmistakable smell of smoke and damp ash. The door slowly swung open. He raised his phone flashlight. The room was empty, stripped bare, peeling walls, exposed floorboards. In the center, a black circular burn mark scarred the wood, as if something had been scorched into it long ago. The mark pulsed faintly, and around it stood figures, charred, blackened, shapes of women in hospital gowns, nurses, small children with hollow eye sockets. They watched him. One stepped forward. Her face was a mass of burned flesh, lips cracked, eyes milky. You answered, she whispered. Daniel's throat tightened. I'm closing it, he said, though his voice shook. He tore open the salt bag and threw it onto the black circle. A howl erupted, not human, layered with dozens of voices. The figures lunged. Cold hands grabbed his arms, his shoulders, his face. Nails scraped his skin. He stumbled forward, dropped his phone, and fell to his knees beside the burn mark. He tried to remember something. Any prayer. Our Father, he whispered. The salt began to smoke. The black mark writhed, stretching like a living thing, trying to pull itself wider. The burned woman grabbed his throat. You're ours. You answered. Daniel kept speaking, the words coming out hoarse and broken. The salt ignited in white light. The figures screamed. One by one they were dragged backward, dissolving into ash-like shadows that collapsed into the shrinking black circle. The woman held on longer than the others, her fingers digging into his neck. I'll take you, she rasped. Daniel grabbed her wrists. They crumbled into black dust. She vanished. The circle shrank, tightened, and disappeared. Silence. He woke to sunlight. He lay on the floor of the room, dust in the air. No burn mark, no figures, just an empty space. Arthur stood in the doorway. You did it, he said quietly. They're gone? Yes, the portal is closed. Daniel nodded weakly. His neck burned where the fingers had been. Arthur helped him up. The apartment is normal now, he said. You can live peacefully. 1 month later, the apartment was quiet. No footsteps, no smells, no whispers. Daniel almost convinced himself it had all been stress, lack of sleep, imagination. He sat in the kitchen drinking coffee when the doorbell rang. A college-aged guy stood outside, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi, I'm here about the room for rent." Daniel frowned. "What room?" The guy showed his phone. A listing. Cheap rent. Photo of the once-locked room. Clean, empty, freshly painted. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He didn't remember posting anything, but he stepped aside. "Come in." Later, the young man left after paying a deposit. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it. Silence. Then he noticed it. On the floor of the room, faint at first, a dark stain slowly seeping through the wood. He stared at it without surprise. Some places couldn't be cleansed. They only rested. He picked up his phone and dialed Arthur. "I found someone," Daniel said. "Good," Arthur replied. "Then you understand." "Yes." Daniel hung up. From behind the closed door came a faint child's laugh. The stain grew darker. Daniel turned off the light and walked away. The apartment was hungry again.